I will never forget, it was my first year at Oberlin, the year I'd graduated from high school, 1993. Perhaps it was the fall of that year, 1994. Issa came into the snack bar at Oberlin, and she was reading the letter that Fred Starr had sent out to all of the students in response to students of color saying that they felt threatened on campus. In fact, this was a feeling of being terrorized in the middle of the cornfields of Ohio, very far away from where any of us come from. And she screamed, "What the fuck?" Looking at this letter, Fred Starr told us in response to the memorial arch that sits in the middle of campus being spray painted with "Good chink equals dead chink" and "Death to all chinks," and on the Muslim Students Association door, someone had put a sign that said, Muslim students suck camel dick. And there had been a range of different issues that felt like as if students of color were targeted on this campus. And we met. And there were many, many young leaders in that group. And I remember looking at all the women of color who just took charge of the situation and said, we have to do something, we have to respond. And Fred Starr said that if you feel threatened, then you should call campus security. So Issa saw this letter and she screamed, "What the fuck?" And I just recalled that how do you express anger and terrorism in a world that just doesn't seem to understand anything that is not readily commodified? How do you express a sense of terrorism? How do you commodify a real sense of terror? And I look at this campus 10 years later, exactly 10 years after I graduated, and campus security harassing students. Oberlin Police Department harassing students to the point where, black students are getting organized around this issue. And last night we met with the Board of Trustees, and many students try to express the sense of terror and the lack of recourse that they have on this campus because the offices, the mechanisms that are already set into place to deal with this are not functioning. One of the trustees said, "You need to write this down, you need to document this, you need to provide evidence." And as a researcher, I can really understand the need for evidence, for documentation. And it's obviously something that I learned at Oberlin as a biochem major. But then I felt, why should these students be responsible for providing the school with evidence of their terror, of their imminent terror on this campus? Because when you talk about terror and you talk about the ability to walk down the street and not wonder if you're going to be harassed, not the fact that you are harassed, but now that it's happened, I wonder. When I go, we have an event tonight. It's connected to our reunion, and when I leave that event tonight, how am I going to get home? Am I going to walk down the street and have who knows who harass me? Because I'm a young black male, and apparently that is very threatening to people, to the point where authorities feel the need to respond with such great fervor that last weekend, a young black woman was thrust to the ground when she asked a police officer why they were harassing and arresting a young black man that they witnessed this altercation. And there were many other students around. And according to, that young lady's sister who has testified on her behalf to the community, there were many white students around, and the police decided to target certain students. So I began to wonder, even if these things are not true, and that's always the thing, is how true are these things, that I always wonder, why would these people lie? But I feel terrorized. I feel as if I have no place to go to except for other students who know what I'm talking about, who don't demand every time that I explain, what was I doing? What did you do? And, at the same meeting last night, there was a young woman who said her dorm mate or friend on this campus had been raped. And when she went to report the rape, of course, the question started, what did you do? What did you do to deserve this? And it's just amazing because I look at my family back in Kentucky, and I look at the demoralization that the students have to suffer at school lunch. If you don't have money for lunch, and many students don't, and they actually are eligible for free lunch, if you don't have that money, or if you don't have that form sent in, the lunchroom staff will harass you. They will physically take away your tray and give you cheese and crackers. And I think, how demoralizing must it be for that to be your job? To, a 5-year-old child, to nickel and dime a 5-year-old child. But how demoralizing is it to feel terror on your own campus? And it's not just the amount of money that people pay to go to a private school, but it's about the investment, the emotional investment that one makes to come here. Parents trust that this school will keep us safe. And there's a parent who's a colleague of mine on this alumni committee who was thinking of sending his child here. Well, his child is a young black man, and he's having to think twice about it, if this would be a safe place for him. I went to the cooperative that I used to belong to, Third World Co-op. Again, students feel totally demoralized on this campus. You have young men of color who are talking about self-love, and I love to hear young men talking about developing self-love. But how do you do that unless it's in a safe space? And a safe space is not one that is cushy and cozy, but one that is challenging in ways that are creative, meaningful, but there is care expressed, and is the underlying care that allows people to shift in their thinking, to shift away from the hegemonic views about men of color towards self-love. And only with self-love can we ever move away from terrorism, not provoking terror in others, and that response around the world. I mean, I really see this as very tied to our social political context around the world, and the United States pushing war as a means as a means of growth, as a means of economic growth, because we all know that, as the saying goes in America, war produces jobs. Um, but war also demoralizes the population, because look at how many decisions we make based on fear. Just look at our votes. Look at the fact that we re-elected that buffoon. And you start to think about, how do you commodify demoralization? How do you commodify this feeling of self-hatred, of fear, of timidity of the world around you, that you're not comfortable in your own skin? And now that most of this nation claims to feel that sense of terror, I really wonder if we will sincerely look at ourselves and start to ask the really valuable but difficult and important questions about, how do we look in the mirror and face our deepest fears? How do we begin to begin to atone for what we've done, the terror that we've created for others? And only in doing so can we ever have hope to end terrorism. Can we ever have hope of ending the situation of imminent fear that many of us feel? And I don't think that it's getting us any further because there's economic success in India and in China. Well, it's a cream of the crop. And what's interesting is that the populations there are further demoralized, because now there's an even greater stake to be held. There are more material possessions that they just don't have. There are bigger and brighter cars, more gas-consuming vehicles, larger houses, more trips that people have to feel as if, one, accounts for their value in life, and if you don't have that, then you're worthless. I'm really concerned about the type of morality that we're spreading in America, and the type that we live here at home.